Kalen DeBoer takes over in Tuscaloosa. Cam Ward is the talk of the town in Coral Gables. And as more than a dozen teams open practice, we've got news and notes from across college football after the stinger. Hello and welcome to episode 17 of Good Morning College Football. I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CampusToCanton.com. If this is your first time joining us, Campus to Canton is a college fantasy football company playing the C2C format, which encompasses both college and NFL players. And if you'd like to join a league, see what it's all about, a great place to find one is the C2C Discord, which is available to all members of CampusToCanton.com, where you can join for as little as $2.99 per month. Join the Discord and get connected with a lot of folks who love the Campus to Canton format of college fantasy football. We also have a wide range of content available at the site, written content, mock drafts, tools, data, all kinds of great stuff. And want to say thank you to our members, of course, those who support this channel by subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. We have a goal of 4,000 subscribers ahead of the NFL draft. Also want to thank those of you who've joined us, especially for my perspective, as folks who've joined recently as C2C Winning Edge or All 22 members who get access to a lot of the work that I do for CampusToCanton.com and CFP Winning Edge. Our returning production database has, stats and who's coming back, who's not for all 134 FBS teams. We are also well underway in working on our 2024 team profiles, which is really the foundation of all the work that I've been doing over the last 5 years. Have player ratings, stats information, recruiting ratings on I believe it's now 13,000 FBS teams across, 13,000 FBS players across all now 135 teams, because we are adding Delaware to the mix a year early this year. Finally, at CampusToCanton.com, it is a big deal for us. The third annual Freshman Supplemental Guide is now fully available. You can go grab that at CampusToCanton.com. It includes full write-ups of over 175 players with rankings, advanced metrics, and much, much more. If you missed us on Friday and Monday, my apologies. Thank you for your patience. Trying to work through a bit of illness here, but it is good to be back, and we have a lot to cover as spring practices are in full swing. Giving a little bit of a recap of the schedule to date, 2 FBS teams have now finished their 2024 spring practice sessions. Hawaii, as we've mentioned previously, played its spring game on February 22nd, and Liberty followed on March 2nd, which we will recap shortly. We've also discussed teams like Air Force, Appalachian State, Auburn, Clemson, Missouri, NC State, SMU, Southern Miss, Toledo also opened spring practice late last week. And since our last show, Bowling Green, BYU, Army, North Texas, and Boston College have also taken the field for multiple practices. On Monday, New Mexico State, Cincinnati, Miami, Pitt, Rice, UTSA, and Alabama kicked off their respective springs. And already this morning, Houston has hit the practice field. We're also scheduled to see Kansas State, LSU, Navy, Oregon State, USF, and Northwestern on Tuesday. So a lot of that information, I'm sure you're keeping up with it like I am via the very handy scheduled, useful piece that Brandon Marcello of 247 Sports has put together. Also, just trying to keep up with it as well as we possibly can on Twitter and various sources as well. But starting chronologically at Liberty, the spring game, as we said, kicked off on, I believe it was Sunday. And John Manson of A Sea of Red, who does a great job covering the defending Conference USA champion Flames, noted that the spring game started with a 60-yard touchdown pass from Kaidon Salter, one of the top returning quarterbacks in college football. I believe he is the QB1 currently in average draft position for college fantasy football drafts. Started the spring game with a bang, 60-yard touchdown completion to Tyson Mobley, a transfer from Coastal Carolina. Now, Manson did note that apparently there was a busted assignment from the defense that made it a particularly easy 60-yard TD connection. But nevertheless, great start for Salter, who has very, very high expectations this season for Liberty, who of course has high expectations as well, defending conference champs, who return their top quarterback, undefeated regular season last year, have a little bit of motivation after being blown out in the Fiesta Bowl by Oregon. But most of the notes from spring centered on the quarterback position. Salter didn't play very much in the spring game. Nate Hampton was the second quarterback to take the field. According to Manson, he struggled a bit. Didn't complete a pass in 6 pass attempts. Did have a 12-yard running play. Appalachian State transfer Ryan Berger, who was named the most improved player at the quarterback position during the spring. Liberty tweeted out a list by position. Berger was notable there. Seems likely that he will be Salter's top backup, I would expect, by the time the fall camp kicks off. But Berger took the field with the first team for the third drive of the game after Salter led the unit. For the first 2 drives, Berger had a nice game, showcased his mobility, according to Manson. And then true freshman, early enrollee Jaden Bradford looked good in the spring game as well, completed 4 of 6 passes for 48 yards and a touchdown on the final play of the scrimmage. Head coach Jamie Chadwell was quoted following the game. Manson passed these along, quote, "A lot of positives to take out of it," according to Chadwell. We did have some injuries through it that we will have to see if we can get some of those guys back as we get later in the season. We still stayed healthy through it for the most part. Now, there wasn't a whole lot of information that came out that I saw, names specifically as who might have been injured for Liberty. So something we'll have to try to track down between now and the start of fall camp for the Flames. So continuing here, the quotes from Chadwell. Now, once we get through spring break, we will have opportunities to work on some areas that we have to improve on. You can always improve on the knowledge of your system, but the technique and some things we've got to improve on if we are going to be the type of program we want to be in contention for championships every year. Fundamentals and techniques have to be our cornerstone. Those are the things we have to continue to improve. Pardon me. BYU offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick spoke with the Deseret News late last week as the Cougars were preparing to open spring practice. Quoting here, Roderick said, "Spring ball will be a competition between Jake," talking about Jake Retzlaff, "and Gary Bohannon for the starting job. It is a two-way race right now." Gary Bohannon, who and I always struggle if I say the right thing. Maybe it's Gary, maybe it's Jerry. My apologies. But former starter at Baylor, spent the last couple of years at USF, did not appear for the Bulls last season in a resurgent season for that program. But expect that, Bohannon has a chance to unseat Retzlaff, who enters as somewhat the incumbent. Did get an opportunity to replace Kaidon Salters, started the final 4 games for BYU last season. Now, all 4 of those games were losses for the Cougars. But, Gary Bohannon definitely does have some experience, was part of a Baylor team that made a run toward a Big 12 title title game appearance a few seasons ago. Did lose his job to Blake Shapen. Also has struggled with injuries in recent years. But Gary Bohannon, 15 appearances in his career, 9 starts. Expect that he will definitely compete for that job there. So quoting here the piece from the Deseret News and offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick. So Gary and Jake will get the bulk of the reps, and then we will find ways to get Cade, Ryder, and Trayson in there to see who we think the third guy is. Early indications are that Trayson Bogar from transfer from Western Michigan is in line to be the third quarterback. And Roderick saying here, we recruited Trayson out of high school and almost signed him. It was a close call, but we ended up not getting him. They had a coaching change there, and he was looking for a change of scenery. He got into school here on his own and walked on. So he will get some reps. One of the top priorities for Roderick for BYU this spring is reestablishing the run game. Quoting here again, says, when we were great on offense, we were known as a physical team that could run the ball. Yeah, we had back-to-back quarterbacks drafted, and we were throwing it down the field and stuff, but it all started with the physical run game. Getting back to that physical run game when we can impose our will on opponents is the most important thing for us to establish this spring. That is critical. It all starts there, and that is the number one goal of spring ball. So BYU will be a little bit limited. Certain positions, a couple of defensive starters expected to miss some time this spring. Couple of replacements need to be found on the offensive line. But finishing here with quotes from Roderick. So now we have some pretty good continuity with returning guys, but we could use 2 more players there for either depth or to compete for a starting job. He's talking about the offensive line specifically here. I think it is critical that we add some depth, but it's not going to be a complete overhaul that it was a year ago, which I feel good about. So, the offensive line and being a key piece that BYU, again, hoping to reestablish that running game where the Cougars last season, according to our team performance numbers, ranked 115th in rushing offensive team performance. So a lot of room for improvement, but that was actually 2 spots better than BYU finished in passing offensive team performance. So overall, the BYU offense really, really struggled last season. We saw some good things out of then true freshman running back LJ Martin. Aiden Robbins started the season there at running back and actually ended up finishing the season coming back after a long layoff. Was a little bit of a surprise entry into the NFL draft. Did have a year of eligibility coming back. Roderick spoke about that a little bit as well. But LJ Martin had over 500 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns in 10 games as a true freshman. He and Miles Davis are two of the top returners for BYU this year. Hinckley Ropati is also back, a few others as well in that running back group, but expect that, especially with Robbins moving on, LJ Martin is going to be the primary ball carrier there. Wide receiver is a position of strength for BYU. Cody Epps is back, Chase Roberts, Keelan Marion, Darius Lassiter as well. So a long list of the wide receivers from last season. Keanu Hill, we mentioned a little bit ago, former starter at wide receiver, is transitioning to tight end, where you would expect that he will compete, be one of the top players expected to replace Isaac Rex, who has moved on to the NFL. But one thing that really stood out for me, I saw a recap video from KSL Sports after BYU's first practice on Friday, I believe it was, where the first name mentioned after talking about the quarterbacks was Reiner Swanson, who was a true freshman tight end for BYU, who apparently stole the show on day one. And there was a write-up, of course, you may have already read it, in the 2024 C2C Freshman and Supplemental Guide about Swanson and how he is one of the more intriguing tight ends among true freshmen this year. Expect that he will have an opportunity to compete for a major role there. But apparently there was, a 15 to 20 minute media viewing period at that first practice. The four quarterbacks who got the reps were led by Ratzliff and Bohannon, with Borgett third and Cade Finnegan, former Boise State quarterback transfer, being the fourth QB there. Apparently there are 10 quarterbacks on the roster for BYU this season, but those four, at least as of right now, getting the early reps initially. A little quarterback update at Auburn from late last week. Justin Ferguson of the Auburn Observer tweeted out some quotes from head coach Hugh Freeze on the quarterback competition, where he said, quote, "Every spot is wide open in my mind right now, but let me be clear. I think Peyton," talking about Peyton Thorne, "has done well with his leadership since we got back in in January." Freeze said that Thorne's job is, quote, "his to lose, but he's got to earn it every day." In our last show, mentioned that I'm I think relatively confident that Peyton Thorne is going to be the quarterback at Auburn this year, and do have some hope that he will be an improved player in his second year in the system, coming in, having a full season, having a full calendar year in the program. I think will be good for Thorne, be good for Auburn as a whole. But as of right now, Peyton Thorne has not officially, wrapped up that job specifically. Ainsley Lee of AL.com had some other quotes about Thorne and the quarterback competition there at Auburn. This was on Thursday. Hugh Freeze here being quoted by Lee. "The hardest thing is when you've got four guys, you want to get looks as getting them all quality reps. We would chart every single rep, every single rep on footwork. I've got a team of three guys that are charged with that, the decision-making, execution, and getting them all quality reps." That was a very challenging day for quarterbacks, for sure. Talking about the first day of practice, apparently, weather conditions were not good. High winds made it a bit rough. Quoting Freeze here again, "I want to get back to the only thing I've known is that giving us success everywhere we've been, the RPO-driven run game and the play action passes off of it. In order to do that, you've got to have a receiver or three that can win in some one-on-ones and quarterbacks that can execute it. I do think our quarterbacks can do that." Now, one item of note here that Ainsley Lee passed on from Hugh Freeze, because there's a new offensive coordinator in the mix. Patrick Nix is now the OC. Hugh Freeze is the play caller. But according to Freeze, quote, "We're changing our whole verbiage, our whole system to what I'm comfortable with. I need to see who is the best grasp on that. So making the move from Philip Montgomery, who was the OC last year at Auburn, going back and implementing a whole new verbiage. So despite saying Thorne second year in the system and all of that, there's certainly still some truth to that. But if you're changing the verbiage, that makes it a little more difficult. It's not quite just as easy as carrying over from last year to this year. So something to keep an eye on. Perhaps that is something that could give Holden Geriner or Hank Brown or Walker White an opportunity to eventually wrestle that job away from Peyton Thorne. Is the fact that it's not exactly the same system from last year to this year. Pardon me. Bear with me. Thank you. Reed Smith of Mean Green 247 had some follow-ups, had some notes from North Texas first spring practice last week. Noted that they've got to replace a quarterback there as well. Former North Texas starter Chandler Rogers has moved on to Cal, and new, incoming likely starter Chandler Morris has not yet arrived. There was, some speculation that perhaps Chandler Morris might not make it to North Texas at all, with his father Chad Morris being hired on staff at Texas State. However, as we talked about last week, now that Texas State has apparently found its new quarterback in former James Madison starter Jordan McLeod. It seems I'm a little more confident now. I was among those that thought that perhaps Morris might not end up at North Texas, but with McLeod moving on to James Madison, from James Madison to Texas State, feel that it's probably still quite likely. And even though Chad Morris is at Texas State now, there are still some family connections with Chandler Morris at North Texas. So nevertheless, without him being on campus this spring, it's an opportunity for Stone Earl, most notably, who did win the job in fall camp briefly before losing it to Rogers last fall, as well as freshman early enrollee Chase McCollum and a transfer from Liberty, Reese Mooney, competing right now, according to Smith of Mean Green 247. Head coach Eric Morris was quoted as saying, really, we have two freshmen at quarterback. We have one that's transferred from Liberty and hasn't played much college football at all, learning a new system, and then Cash should be in high school right now as an early enrollee. But continuing here, I think Stone has grown a ton. To watch him operationally right now has been super impressive. He's a super competitive kid, and I think he's done a super good job of rallying the troops over the last couple of months. As I said, Chandler Morris is expected to arrive on campus this summer. Quoting here from Eric Morris, throw a couple more reps to Chandler when he joins this summer. So one note that Brett Vito, who does a great job covering the Mean Green for local news in Denton and surrounding areas, J.D. Head was removed from the roster, is going to be medically retired there. And as we noted, Jace Reuter, a former quarterback, is apparently practicing at linebacker. So that should clear the way for Chandler Morris to compete with Stone Earl and Reese Mooney, it seems like, as his top competition there. But Morris, assuming all goes well and he arrives as expected this summer, should be considered a heavy favorite to start for the Mean Green this fall. Some good news for Army. Starting offensive lineman, 2023 team captain, Connor Finucane will be back for a fifth year, a rare fifth year for the Black Knights. This was according to the Black Knight Nation. website, which does a great job covering Army. Finney Kane started 37 straight games since the beginning of his sophomore season, is not going to be with the team for spring practice, which started last week, but will return to the team this summer, graduate West Point in December. Quotes from head coach Jeff Monken here from the piece. I anticipate being an under center team that runs gun, not the other way around. Talking about how, we touched on this in our last episode, that Army installed more of a shotgun-based offense last season, but made a change mid-year. They are now going back to the under the center option offense as the base, but according to Monken, will still have some of those wrinkles, mix in a little bit of shotgun as well. Continuing here, Monken said, we probably moved more to the under the center stuff the last couple of years, talking about what former offensive coordinator Brent Davis did, than we had earlier. There has been some time in my tenure here at Army where we ran more gun than we did in other years, but I anticipate we will run both. I don't know how much of each, and I think that will be determined by our confidence in what we are doing, the quarterback and the skill players. We have to be able to do the things we want to do. I never felt all year the confidence that I had all those years running under center stuff, that we were controlling games on offense, controlling the clock and limiting possessions for the other team. I realized that the under the center system gave us tremendous value, that we could be really different and unique. And that, I think, is the key point to me. We remember in years past where Army had some pretty high profile, close calls against teams like Michigan and Oklahoma, where they really were able to dictate the tempo on offense, play keep away, where Army is consistently going to be, at a severe talent disadvantage, utilizing that slow pace on offense, that option, triple option under the center. It's very unique, difficult to prepare for. Opponents don't see it very often unless they play Army every year, and even then, probably only spend a week, a little bit more maybe, in the summer or the week leading up to the game, trying to prepare for it. It's difficult, and so even teams that have, just have completely huge talent advantages, outclass Army as far as 4-star, 5-star recruits, still struggle. And especially if Army is able to move the change consistently and really drain the clock. And according to Jeff Monken, that was one of the big problems last year. One of the reasons why it was a fairly short experiment as far as switching up the offensive style. And the reason that they did it, there were some changes in the blocking rules, cut blocking rules from the NCAA, that we talked about, in C2-A-Days last fall, as why Army was making this change. In the CFB Winning Edge podcast, we talked about a little bit. But going back to Monken's quotes here, he really shines light on why they're making the move back. I want to control the game on offense by running the football. Whatever we need to do that, then that is what we are going to do. It is how we built our program and the success we have had here, and I think is important for Army to do that. If we are going to have success, we're going to have to run the football and control the clock. So this time last year, there was a little bit of excitement about some of the passing that we saw from Army in the spring. Some of that carried over into the fall. Some of the success that the staff, Andrew Thatcher, I believe is the name of the offensive coordinator last year, brought in from Division II Nebraska Kearney. Some of the unique things that we were anticipating that Army was going to be able to do, but it just didn't quite land and didn't quite mesh with the philosophy that Jeff Monken really wants there in West Point. All right, now a couple of blue blood programs have hit the spring practice field, most notably perhaps Alabama. Mike Rodak of Bama 247 247, pardon me, noted that Jalen Milroe, unsurprisingly, took the first team snaps at quarterback for new head coach Kalen DeBoer on Monday, the first spring practice for DeBoer and his new staff in Tuscaloosa on Monday. In the media session after, DeBoer was asked if Milroe was, quote, his guy. Rodak was among those who were on hand for DeBoer, who said, quote, you want competition, right? So the competition is always going to be there. Yeah, someone had to take the first reps today with the ones when we lined up, and we referred to them as that, and Jalen did. Charlie Potter of Bama Online followed up saying, quote, he's putting everything into it he can, but I fully expect those guys that are hungry to push the guys ahead of him. Jalen Milroe, as noted by Rodak, is the leading returning vote getter in the Heisman Trophy voting last season. Nevertheless, there's still some speculation out there because DeBoer is a new head coach, because Washington, where DeBoer took over, and Michael Penix as his quarterback last year, it just doesn't seem like exactly the smoothest transition. Penix being a pass first quarterback, Milroe a little bit more athletic, a little bit more utilized more as a runner for Alabama last year, and perhaps most notably the fact that Washington transfer Austin Mack followed DeBoer from Seattle. There's some thought that will Milroe be able to hold on to this job? I think personally, Milroe is an overwhelming favorite. I think that Kalen DeBoer is a coach who is willing to adapt his scheme, his system to the strengths of the roster. And Jalen Milroe is one of the most talented quarterbacks in college football. Can throw a deep ball, certainly has struggled at times as a passer, has not looked the most polished, in the pocket, certainly, but has, as we saw where he really took charge of that quarterback position late in the season after some early struggles, can be a highly, highly productive player, and is somebody that this Alabama team really seemed to respond to last year, led them to a 12-2 overall record. The ball was in his hands with the game on the line in the Rose Bowl. And the numbers were pretty good. Average 10 yards per pass attempt, which is pretty elite status. Had 23 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions, ran for 530 yards, 12 touchdowns last year, which led the team, is the leading returning rusher for Alabama this season, of course, with Jason McClellan moving on to the NFL, Roydell Williams transferring out to Florida State. And Milroe has a big experience edge over guys like Ty Simpson, who only attempted 20 passes, and Austin Mack, who didn't attempt any. Jeremy Bernard had more pass attempts and completions at Washington last year than Mack. Bernard, of course, transferring in to Alabama, expected to probably be the number one wideout. He'll compete with folks like Kobe Prentice for that role. But Alabama is one of the early teams that I was able to put together their 2024 team profile so far. And I have to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous at this point at what the depth situation looks like for Alabama. Jalen Milroe right now, as we've talked about in our quarterback rankings, hit on the VGR ratings, having updated those for this Alabama team profile. Jalen Milroe is now a 94 in our VGR video game ratings, CFP winning edge. The numbers certainly for all teams aren't finalized just yet, but expect that he will be, a top 15 type starter, perhaps top 10 once all is said and done. It'll be a little while before we know for sure. But looking at how the position strength numbers sit, each position group, those video game ratings, we roll those up into, how do the quarterbacks look as a whole? How do the running backs look as a whole? Wide receivers, tight ends, offensive line, give the starters, the biggest amount of weight, but look at how the depth impacts that group. And right now at the running back position, even though we expect, Alabama might rank as high as number 1 in average 247 rating, Rivals rating, on 3 rating, because the lack of experience, career production so far, that group, might be outside of the top 25 in position strength once, all teams are done. The wide receiver group, probably going to be closer to top 15 than top 10 in those strength ratings adjusted for experience production, even though they're probably going to be, top 2 or 3 in average raw rating. The offensive line is a little bit of a concern. 2 full-time starters are back, bringing in a full-time starter from Washington. So the middle of that offensive line is probably going to be in pretty good shape. But the tackle positions are a little bit of a question mark right now. And even though highly rated players, as usual, again, average 247 rating, probably going to be top 2, top 3 for Alabama. But right now, the position strength, the way we calculate it, factoring in experience and production, is more looking like a top 15 unit, I would expect. Defensively, I'm even more concerned, especially in the secondary. And Malachi Moore is back as a full-time starter, former all-conference player, talented players transferring in, Damani Jackson, Keon Saab, but there are a lot of true freshmen who are likely to play some significant snaps for Alabama in the secondary. And that worries me just a little bit. As it stands right now, Alabama defensively, their roster strength rating, again, shaping up to be more of like a top 15 type team. We're used to seeing Alabama, top 5 easily, top 3 really, and a chance to be top 1, or to be the number 1 team in roster strength. I tweeted out very, very early, way too early, right? When I was thinking of how things might shake out for our power ratings when it looked like Nick Saban was coming back, potentially, or before he retired, before guys like Caleb Downs transferred out. We got official word of who was transferring out or moving on to the NFL. I really thought there was a chance that Alabama might have the highest roster strength rating that we'd ever seen at CFB Winning Edge. Things have changed dramatically, and I don't anticipate Alabama being a top 10 team in roster strength defensively in the preseason. There's a good chance they might actually be outside the top 15. So a lot of moving parts, even though, we didn't get a whole lot from this very first practice at Alabama, other than Jalen Milroe being, first in line for those quarterback snaps. There's going to be a lot that we're going to have to dig into over the coming weeks and months to figure out there, because I'm a little bit concerned about the depth situation for Alabama, in these early days. Moving on at Miami, it was a pretty universal response that Cam Ward was the star of the show, had a I don't want to say perfect, but as far as debuts go for one practice period, Cam Ward, the reviews were sparkling, and folks like Adam Lichtenstein of the Sun Sentinel, of Barry Jackson and Susan Miller Dignan of the Miami Herald, Manny Navarro of the Athletic, Matt Shadell of Kane Sport. The reviews were just glowing that Cam Ward was incredibly accurate, looked great in his first practice on Monday with Miami. Adam Lichtenstein opened his Practice One recap piece with many Hurricanes and other college football fans affectionately call the offseason, quote, lying season, a chance to believe that the very best in their teams, even if they know those hopeful beliefs will turn out to be lies come the fall. But Hurricanes fans have many reasons to believe that those will actually be truths this year. Quoting linebacker Wesley Bissanth, Liechtenstein passed along, quote, it definitely feels different from past teams. The first year, just figuring things out. Second year, still kind of figuring things out. This year, I feel like we added a lot of key pieces, so I feel like we're going to add those pieces together and win. Cam Ward bringing a lot of optimism, bringing a lot of confidence, it sounds like, to Miami. I know that Ward was somebody that in the most recent Chasing the Natty, Jared Palmgren and Chris Kay discussed. I believe he was the first quarterback discussed as being taken too early in CFF drafts so far. But reports on the ground, regardless of how you think that Ward going into a new system, of course, no longer at the super pass heavy Washington State offense. Shannon Dawson, his success or lack of success last year, transitioning as to the play caller in Miami first year, taking over for somewhat of a failed experiment under Josh Gaddis in Mario Cristobal's first season. Will it be, will the opportunity be there for Cam Ward? Will he put the ball in the air quite as much? That remains to be seen. He certainly has some experienced wide receivers to work with who were also impressive in Practice One, according to reports. Xavier Restrepo in the slot being key among those. But this is an offense that I think personally I have reason to be optimistic we'll see some improvement. I think that Ward, bringing some stability to that position where Tyler Van Dyke struggled last year, didn't quite click, but there's also depth. Reese Poffenbarger also received rave reviews. Mario Cristobal was very complimentary of the quarterbacks as a whole. Emory Williams was back at practice today, coming off an injury. Apparently, according to Cristobal, he has been really impressive. So the quarterback situation there at Miami seems to be in very good hands with Restrepo, Isaiah Horton, and Jacoby George working with the first team wide receiver group, Ray Joseph, Mike Redding, Shamar Kirk, and JoJo Trader and Nye Carr with the 2s and 3s. Seems like that group is going to be solid for Miami this season. Elijah Arroyo was back as the first team tight end. High hopes for him as well. Riley Williams apparently was second in the tight end pecking order. Also saw Trevante Citizen back on the field, highly regarded running back recruit a couple of years ago for Miami. Hasn't taken a snap in his first 2 regular seasons due to a knee injury, but good to see him back. But Miami will be a little bit shorthanded, as Liechtenstein was among those that reported Akeem Mesidor, Cole McConaughey, Damari Brown, top cornerback, Brian Ballum, Cam McCormick at tight end, Joshua Horton were out for spring practice 1, should be back at some point in the spring, but Isaiah Thomas, Najee Kelly, A.J. Allen at running back, Zion Nelson, one of the top most talented offensive linemen, still dealing with injuries, are among those who are going to be out all spring. All right. I'm struggling a little bit here to finish up, so we'll try to move quickly here toward the rest of the group. But Pitt was among those that started spring practice on Monday. Jerry DePola of Trib Live passed along something I hadn't realized, that the offensive coordinator change there at Pitt was coming with a real emphasis on increasing the pace. That was a big talking point for Pat Narduzzi in his media appearance after spring practice number 1. DePola quoted Narduzzi as saying, I don't know if we'll ever have a delay of game ever again. Nate Yarnell, who is basically anointed as the starter for the Panthers at this early point in the spring, mentioned that he ran a similar fast-paced, no-huddle offense in high school. Pat Narduzzi was very complimentary of Yarnell. DePaulo, quoting here, "I just feel like this guy's a leader, and I think our team has believed in him. He did a pretty darn good job there when he got into games, meaning the last 2 games of the 2023 season. To me, he deserves that opportunity to find out where he goes from there." The job belongs to Yarnell, with no guarantees, of course, but Christian Value, who got a crack at replacing Phil Dracovic before Yarnell last season, isn't, it sounds like, going to be in an official competition with Yarnell. It is Yarnell's job as of right now. And according to Yarnell, who was made available to reporters, he said, quote, "It means everything." Talking about Narduzzi here, to have confidence in you and to believe in you. It allows me to go out there and just play football and try to be the best that I can be. Yarnell described the practice Monday as, quote, "fast, never stop, getting reps the way it should be, open receivers everywhere." Quoting here again, "I'm ready to take my game to the next level. I think this is the perfect opportunity, and Coach Bell is the perfect coach. He's hungry. He wants to win. He's coming in here, making sure we get wins this year. We're not here to be stagnant. He knows what he's doing, and he's confident." At Rice, they started spring practice on Monday as well. Head coach Mark Bloomgren, similarly to Pitt, seemingly handing the job to Nate Yarnell at this early stage. E.J. Warner seems like he is locked in as the new quarterback for the Owls. Bloomgren quoted here, The Roost, which does a great job covering Rice, tweeted out a video where Bloomgren said, "We live in a world of fractional seconds, and he is so good at seeing things pre-snap." Talked about that one of the priorities for Rice this spring is, really assessing what is there in front of the offense pre-snap. That E.J. Warner, who quote, has put in a tremendous amount of work. He has lived in the building like a coach. Was a football junkie, skilled, talented, but also really emphasizing how well he sees things pre-snap. That study apparently in the film room paying off dividends already in practice 1 for Warner and Rice. There's been some talk and some things written at C2C about Dean Connors as one of the more exciting running back options in CFF drafts, maybe a little under the radar in the very early stages, but certainly going to be a popular name in the middle rounds, I would expect, if not earlier, now that Nate Marquise has shined a light. E.J. Warner stepping into what was, especially when JT Daniels was the quarterback, pretty prolific passing attack, won't have my mind just went blank. The wide receiver, top receiver there, Luke McCaffrey, but there still is some talent returning for E.J. Warner at that wide receiver group. I think a fairly intriguing option as well. Warner, of course, threw for 3,000 plus yards last season at Temple, 23 touchdowns, was intercepted 12 times, did average less than 7 yards per pass attempt. So certainly some room for improvement, but, has a lot of experience throwing the football. Connors is actually the leading returning receiver, but tight end Bowden Green, an interesting option who had 39 catches and 3 touchdowns last year, 383 yards. Landon Ransom goals, Rawson McNeil, Braylon Walker, and Kobe Campbell among the leading receivers, all of whom had double-digit catches, over 100 yards, and at least 1 touchdown last year for Rice, who does rank top 10 in our returning production numbers. All right. a few injury reports before we get to our team of the day, New Mexico State, out of Houston, which, as we said, started this morning. On Monday, Coach Willie Fritz noted that quarterback Donovan Smith had labrum surgery and will miss spring practice. However, this morning, Jason Holmes of GoCougs.com tweeted out that Donovan Smith is dressed out and participating in certain aspects of practice one, but is not expected to be in any full speed drills or throwing. Zion Chris, who transferred from Louisiana, you would expect this will be an opportunity for him to make a real charge for that QB1 job. Chris really benefited from a lot of extra reps last year at Louisiana in the spring with a couple of his competitors out with injury. So we'll see if he's going to be able to make a move with Smith out or at least severely limited. Kansas will be starting spring practice relatively soon. There was a report from Shreyas Lada of the Kansas City Star over the weekend that due to the lingering back injury for Jalon Daniels, which cost him 9 games last season, his availability is still somewhat questionable for the spring. Lada did post, that head coach Lance Leopold is, quote, not concerned about Daniels during the spring, but rather what he will do in August. So something to monitor there. A couple of notes out of Clemson camp, which is ongoing. Toby Corriston of the Tiger observed in practice 2 wide receiver Adam Randall, who looked noticeably stronger this spring and took first team reps again on Friday. However, did come up holding his lower back and hip area during a drill. Randall did continue with the drills, but perhaps something to keep an eye on as the Tigers continue with spring practice. Randall, of course, has been limited early on by injuries in his Clemson collegiate career. Chapel Fowler of the State in Greenville tweeted out a video of Clemson quarterback Cade Klubnik, who said, that, quote, our goal is to go undefeated, and I fully believe this is the team that can do it. I think we've got every single piece. I'm there was a video that I did with Felix Sharp and Chris Moxley a week or so ago where we talked a little bit about Clemson, and I know there was a lot of disappointment last year, but I definitely do see a path and think that Clemson is going to be one of the teams, maybe the team to beat in the ACC this season. Did get a chance to look at their team profile, and the numbers right now are right there on par with Alabama on the offensive side of the ball, almost exactly the same right now in overall roster strength as far as the Clemson team profile goes. They're not quite there with Georgia, who's another team that we do have a full profile for, and Clemson, of course, does have Georgia on the schedule this year, so that will be going undefeated. Not so sure. They are going to be probably relatively heavy underdogs as far as what we're used to seeing from Clemson in that game against Georgia, but they're going to be a tough team and perhaps flying a little bit under the radar right now. One freshman who is not flying under the radar, and again, one that you can read all about in that C2C freshman and supplemental guide. But apparently the message boards are already buzzing about Bryant Wesco, the wide receiver, who is likely to make a pretty early impact for the Tigers this year. A couple of other injury notes. It sounds like Micah Hudson, the 5-star freshman at Texas Tech, is going to miss spring practice due to a knee procedure, so that could limit his start to what we expect will be a highly productive freshman campaign for him. A note that I read from Antonio Morales in The Athletic over the weekend, did not realize that tight end Luke McCree sustained a serious injury during Holiday Bowl practices, which is likely to knock him out for significant time this fall. Carson Tarbachi is expected to be the number 1 tight end in spring practice, so something to make note of there perhaps at USC. And a couple of coaching notes. Jim Salgado is going to be the new defensive coordinator for Louisiana, former longtime NFL assistant. Most recently spent 6 seasons with the Bills, but was at Michigan State coaching corners last fall. Couple of offensive coordinators from the 2023 season have new jobs as analysts. Kevin Johns is going to be an analyst at Oklahoma. He was the Duke offensive coordinator last year, so will be part of helping to groom man, my brain is shutting down here in our last few minutes. Jackson Arnold taking over there at Oklahoma, of course. That'll perhaps be one to watch, and there is a connection there with the staff at Oklahoma, so that one makes sense. Pete Thamel reported over the weekend that Utah is bringing in Mike Bajakian, who was Northwestern's offensive coordinator last season. He will be an analyst at Utah. And Georgia State expected to hire former Charlotte head coach Will Healy to coach the running backs. Last thing that we will talk about today is New Mexico State, which is one of those teams that opened spring practice on Monday. And Sam Guzman of KTSM.com was on hand for some quotes from Tony Sanchez, new head coach of the Aggies, who said, quote, "It honestly didn't feel that much different. Obviously, I'm not coaching one group. I'm coaching the whole team. It's a very similar group of guys in a similar place that I've been the last couple of years. So that's been nice part of the transition." Talking about going from wide receivers coach to new head coach. New Mexico State is a team where, I mean, he mentioned, some continuity, familiar group. But as far as the numbers go, New Mexico State, which of course, an unprecedented 10-win season, made it to the Conference USA title game where they fell short against Liberty. But from a number standpoint, there's a lot of turnover. New Mexico State ranks 116th in our FBS adjusted returning production numbers, 134th on the defensive side of the ball, so dead last. And the quarterback position lost its top 2 players in the exciting quarterback Diego Pavia, who threw for 2,900 yards, 26 touchdowns, and also led the team with 923 rushing yards and 7 scores last season. And a talented true freshman who we only saw briefly last year, but Blaze Berlovitz. Both of those quarterbacks have since transferred to Vanderbilt. That leaves Eli Stowers as the most experienced quarterback returning on the roster, and Stowers did most of his work, in kind of a short yardage quarterback situation last year, where he ran 29 times for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns, but also played tight end. Caught 35 passes. Actually, the leading returner as far as receptions go last season. 366 yards receiving is second most among returners to Trent Hudson, and caught 2 touchdown passes. So Eli Stowers, probably not going to be the starting quarterback for New Mexico this year. Among newcomers who Guzman mentioned, I would say that the most likely to take that first snap of the season is going to be Deuce Hogan, who spent his most recent time at Kentucky, but a former Iowa signee out of high school. He appears to be in line, perhaps, to start for New Mexico State at quarterback. There is a lot to work with at running back. Star Thomas is back as the leading ball carrier among running backs, had 112 carries last year, 653 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Monte Watkins, a huge big play running back, averaged nearly 10 yards per carry on 59 carries last year, had 2 touchdowns. Jamani Jones has been a starter for the Aggies in the past as well. He had 334 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. McKalen Young and Lorenzo McMillan expected to be back as well. So the running back group is in great shape. I mentioned they bring back Trent Hudson, leading wide receiver. Jonathan Brady has transferred out, but Hudson had 10 touchdown catches last year. Cordell David, Bryce Childress are back. So, there are certainly some pieces to work with. A veteran offensive line expecting to return, 4 players who had double-digit starts last year, a 5th who had 9 starts, 2 others with starting experience. So the offensive line group is in pretty good shape, but the quarterback position, a major question mark. And as I said, the defense is in a real period of transition, not just personnel wise, with the top 5 tacklers from last season, 6 of the top 7 transferring out. New Mexico State is also implementing a fully new scheme on that side of the ball. Sanchez, again, Guzman passing along these quotes. Defensively, we're putting in a whole new scheme. So it's just about getting everybody coached up, everybody on the same page, and make sure we get our alignments and assignments down. There are new coordinators on both sides of the ball, with Tyler Wright, being promoted to offensive coordinator from the tight ends and special teams coordinator job last year, but new defensive coordinator as well, coming in from Sam Houston. The new DC is Joe Morris. So a brand new scheme on that side of the ball, basically a brand new unit on that side of the ball, with just 25.7% of that adjusted defensive returning production back this year. New Mexico State playing a manageable schedule. Do get the rematch in the Conference USA championship game against Liberty early. That's in week 2. Manageable Conference USA schedule, trips to Sam Houston, Jacksonville State, FIU, and Middle Tennessee. Home games against UTEP, Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech as well. Those are not in order. Non-conference games against rival New Mexico, against Fresno State, which will be a tough matchup. The season opener against an FCS opponent, Southeast Missouri. It's not. There's no Power 5 opponents early on. They do have a trip to Texas A&M late in the season, but a chance perhaps for to lean on that running game, get Deuce Hogan, we assume, acclimated at the quarterback position, get that new look defense hopefully in order a little bit in week 1 before those tough 2 opponents, home against Liberty, at Fresno State. It's a question mark, and Tony Sanchez, things didn't really go particularly well for him in his first head coaching opportunity at the FBS level at UNLV, but he is a New Mexico State guy, was on staff under Jerry Kill, coaching receivers, as we mentioned. So there is a little bit of continuity there, but New Mexico State, to me, is a big question mark. And I do fear, despite some continuity on offense, despite, what should be, I think, a pretty strong rushing attack, New Mexico State's just been a really tough job for a long time. And Jerry Kill is a pretty special head coach, pretty special program builder, turnaround artist of sorts. So we'll see how the numbers shake out once we get that team profile fully updated. But I'm afraid that the work that they have to do defensively is really going to make New Mexico State vulnerable in Tony Sanchez's first season as head coach there. So I would expect getting back to a bowl game, not just getting back to the 10-win status or competing in Conference USA. But I think it's going to be a battle week in and week out against teams like Middle Tennessee and UTEP, certainly Jacksonville State and Sam Houston. It's going to be tough, I think, for New Mexico State to get back to a bowl game. But plenty of time. We shall see. And they are certainly one of the teams among more than a dozen now who have kicked off spring practice. So tomorrow, we will be back. We plan to be back to give some updates on, as I mentioned, teams like K-State, LSU, Oregon State, as many notes as we can find, and the rest of this week. But that's going to do it for us today. This has been episode 17 of Good Morning College Football. Thank you for joining us again, as we had to miss a couple of episodes Friday and Monday, but we hope to be back almost every day moving forward with I'm sure the occasional day off, especially as we dig into the depth of these team profile, that work. We'll probably have to take a day off here or there, but hopefully I'll be back close to 100% for the rest of this week, and we'll have more spring practice updates from across the country, from campus to Canton. Do please give this video a like. Thank you for supporting this channel, for subscribing to campustocanton.com, and we will be back tomorrow, Wednesday, on Good Morning College Football.